Buenas and half a day, everyone. Good morning. This oversight hearing by the Committee on Maritime and Air Transportation, Parks, Tourism, Higher Education, and the Advancement of Women, Youth, and Senior Citizens is hereby called to order. Today is April 6, 2023, and the time now is 9:34 a.m. For the record, and in accordance with the Open Government Law, notices for this hearing were sent on March 30th, 2023, and again on April 4th, 2023. In addition, this hearing was noticed on the Guam Legislature's website and the Government of Guam Public Notices portal. Joining me here this morning, I'd like to thank our committee members, Vice Chair Jesse Lujan, members Senator Roy Kanata, Senator Talo Taitagui, Senator Dwayne St. Nicholas, and Senators Tom Fisher and Senator Chris Duenas. Thank you very much, colleagues, for being here this morning. Before we discuss items on our agenda, which include financial updates, GVB board and membership, GVB enabling legislation and bylaws, Guam destination management, industry recovery updates, I'd like to first provide the general rules of conduct for this hearing. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide the legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony may be read, and lengthy testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes. Obviously, we will allow the time here today for those who are testifying to go beyond 5 minutes. Those testifying will be allowed to present written or oral testimony. Once you're done, we ask that you please remain in the room for questions and additional testimony as may be desired by members of the panel. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the nature of the agenda. The chair will invite individuals to testify, and we have the panel here today from the Guam Visitors Bureau. Before you begin speaking, we ask that you please state your name for record purposes. The order of questioning will begin with myself, followed by the vice chair, and the rest of the members of the committee and the additional senators here this morning. If there are others to join, each member will be allowed to pose questions to the panel today. Personal inference as to the character or motive of any senator or individual testifying is not permitted. Any violations of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from the public hearing room for this proceeding. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and may be asked to leave the public hearing room. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room today. As chairperson of the Legislative Tourism Committee, we have the responsibility to assist GVB in meeting the mandates of its enabling law and ensure the agency is equipped with the resources and leadership that are required to improve the Guam product and promote our destination to the world. For 2 years, COVID was primarily a public health issue with near unprecedented economic consequences. There are still health concerns, but just last week, in referencing the latest Omicron variant, the CDC stated, "We have the tools to fight it." So I think we can all agree that it is safe to say the worst of COVID as a health issue is behind us. The challenge before us is strengthening our position as a destination. It is in this context and the spirit that this hearing is taking place. We are here to provide GVB with the proper forum to present information and respond to questions regarding specific issues which are outlined in today's agenda. Today's oversight hearing will accept testimony not only from GVB board chairperson, the president, the vice president, and legal counsel, but from other agency representatives and community members if anyone wishes to do so today. At this time, I'd like to ask for the Sergeant at Arms to swear in those who will be offering testimony and/or answering questions during this oversight hearing. Sergeant at Arms. Thank you. So if there's anyone else here who is going to join the panel at some point today, please come up to swear in.
Please raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, do you all affirm that any and all information you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Madam Chair, under oath, you may proceed.
Thank you, Sergeant at Arms. I'd like to begin with introductions for the table. So I know that we have our board chairperson here, Mr. George Chu. You may begin.
Good morning, Chairwoman Shelton, Vice Chairman Lujan, and members of the 37th Guam Legislature that are on the committee. My name is George Chu, and I'm the newly elected chairman of GVB. It's my pleasure to be here this morning. But before I turn this over to the management of GVB, I'd just like to make a comment about what we've all been reading in the newspaper. I received the BRCC report last night, right around 5 p.m. I want to commend the management of GVB for an excellent job of putting together this BRCC report. And having done so, they have also properly submitted this report to the OPA, to the AG, and to the Ethics Commission. And they've clearly stated to the newspaper that this report that they have done, as far as they could go, is now in the hands of the proper authorities to investigate further if there's further investigation warranted. It is out of the hands of the management already, and they've done an excellent job in putting the report together. So it's my hope that today's oversight meeting will focus on what the management is going to propose to work with the board to move GVB forward in returning our tourism economy to what it was pre-pandemic levels. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. President?
Before I begin, Madam Chair, let me say I associate myself with the remarks of the Chair that after, hopefully today we get into the GVB matters that, and whatever is moving forward would move forward on its own pace. But thank you, Mr. Chairman, for those remarks. Good morning, Chairman Amanda Shelton, Vice Chair Jesse Anderson Lujan, and members of the committee. Thank you for having us here today. And thank you for the opportunity to update you on the Bureau's financial status, membership governance, enabling statute, bylaws, destination management, and industry recovery from the COVID pandemic. As you know, the board paused further meetings in May of last year until the GVB bylaws can be reviewed and amended to conform with the enabling law. GVB operations, however, could not be paused at a critical time when green shoots of tourism recovery were at hand. The legislature was mindful of this situation and had the foresight to enact Bill number 24-37 into Public Law 36107, giving me fiscal authority to carry out the Bureau's operation seamlessly during the pause. Section 35, Fiscal Authority for the Guam Visitors Bureau for fiscal year 2023, the authority and responsibility found in sections 9113B and 9110 of Chapter 9, Title 12, Guam Code Annotated, as well as Section 4105A of Chapter 4, Title 4, Guam Code Annotated, shall fall under the authority and responsibility of the General Manager over the Guam Visitors Bureau's business affairs. This is an important provision that enabled us to make the significant progress to date in our tourism recovery. Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Ways and Means Chairman Joe San Agustin, for also including another fiscal year 23 budget provision allowing GVB to expend up to the level of revenues collected, Section 11, Public Law 36107. With half of the fiscal year behind us, we understand that there's already $3 million of unexpended tourist attraction fund carryovers. This sum is likely to double or even reach more than $7 million this summer when Japan visitors pick up and Korean arrivals maintain its current trajectory for the year. We have requested that these carryover be made available to GVB so that we can replenish our depleted stock of collateral materials address deteriorated destination assets, and augment our marketing strategies. The budget law has provided that excess special revenue funds shall not lapse and not be subject to related appropriation restraints. Madam Chair and Senators, we had requested $26.6 million for this fiscal year, but were cut about $7.7 million, an amount very close to the carryover amount I just mentioned. To certain naysayers in the media who question the realistic nature of GVB's $29 million budget request for next fiscal year, I can only suggest that they should listen less to the uninformed and to be in their own echo chamber. The reality is that excess TAF revenues to date are based on 40% of pre-COVID arrivals, a metric far below the 70% anticipated next year based on industry recovery expectations by PATA, IATA, and UNWTO. In keeping with your committee agenda, however, I will be asking our financial controller, Rod Gutmalin, to give you an update on the Bureau's financial situation, followed by legal counsel Joe McDonald's overview and status of GVB bylaws and enabling statute. But before turning it over to them, however, I believe it is appropriate for the committee to be apprised of my performance since the board appointed me to this position in July 2020 at the onset of COVID. This pandemic has since proven to be the most unprecedented, destructive, and protracted collapse of our tourism industry. Upon my appointment to this position, I had to confront the collapse in our tourism industry while inheriting a very serious employee morale problem and pending action on illegal disclosure of personal employee data. At a time when arrivals were down 98% and hotel TAF revenues were marginal, I was able to secure other funds that enabled GVB to function, cope with the pandemic, and establish the footing for our tourism recovery. GVB resourcefulness to meet this funding challenge has not been easy. To paraphrase a popular saying, necessity is the mother of invention. I was able to galvanize and motivate GVB employees to work on a tourism recovery plan that resulted in a touchless EDF customs declaration form and refinancing our hot bonds to generate $13 million in savings that improved our cash flow in a deteriorated TAF revenue environment. And we redirected GVB marketing assets to achieve Governor Lou Leon Guerrero's goal of vaccinating 80% of our island residents by July 21st goal, and we achieved that on July 29. We instituted and patented our Airbnb program that generated 2,300 visitors from Taiwan alone, and another unknown number from East Asia and the Philippines during the shutdown. We galvanized the mayor's support that has led to renewed community involvement in delivering authentic destination experiences such as the Island Fiesta Tours, Coco Road Race, Guam Island Micronesia Fair, and the Guam Barbecue Block Party. The One Village, One Attraction initiative we have embarked upon is designed to shift the island center of tourism from Tumon to the entire island experience. Major cleanup and renovation of highly visited parks. No more flooding in Tumon by Hyatt after cleaning the culverts, still in progress though. We instituted an aggressive free COVID testing program, differentiating us from competing destinations, and jump-started the early return of Korean visitors, now leading our recovery. Improving our arrivals are positively correlated with the outbound growth in our Northeast Asian source markets, with Korea beating the benchmark year to date, and Japan expected to break out this summer after the government downgrades its pandemic risk category to a normal flu season. The first of 22 Taiwan charter flights has arrived with a full load, and more than 3,500 visitors are expected through June. In the interest of time, I have only highlighted a few milestones on my watch. However, for the record, I am attaching a more inclusive list of accomplishments to date. Madam Chair, I will now ask the Financial Controller to update the committee on GVB's financial situation, followed by Mr. McDonald, who will speak to the enabling statute, board governance, memberships, and bylaws, as well as an update on our internal review of board exposure to ultra-virus acts and conflicted agents that might have been facilitating improper activities. Dr. Parrish will then wrap up our presentation with updates on destination management and industry recovery. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. You may proceed. Please state your name for the record.
Half a day, Chairwoman Shelton, Vice Chair Lujan, and other senators. My name is Rudgood Mullen, and I'm the Financial Controller for the Guam Visitors Bureau. I'll be presenting the updates on GVB's financials. Presented on the screen is the cash funds as of February 28, 2023. Total cash and cash equivalents amount to approximately $31.4 million. Of this amount, $13.5 million is comprised of funds from the American Rescue Plan Act, which is classified as restricted. Other restricted funds include the GVB Membership Fund and funds restricted by public laws, such as the Pele San Vitores Road Project, the Cultural and Sports Ambassador Fund, and other funds. Encumbrances are also presented. Encumbrances amount to approximately $10.5 million and is mainly comprised of the remaining costs for contracts, administrative operations, and open purchase orders for the fiscal year. Funds have also been assigned to projects and commitments. $1.8 million have been assigned to marketing efforts to the Japan market. Other assigned funds include market recovery initiatives, the San Vitores Road Mitigation Project, lighting improvements, and other projects. The remaining funds have been earmarked for payables and other operational costs for the remainder of the fiscal year. The chart on the right presents the composition of funds. These present the majority of GVB, as presented, the majority of GVB funds are comprised of restricted funds and encumbrances for contracts, administrative costs, and open purchase orders. The statement of revenues and expenses as of February 2023 will be shown on the following slide. As presented, the Tourist Attraction Fund and the General Fund allotments provide for a majority of GVB's $8.3 million revenue. To the right presents GVB's expenses, along with a breakdown of the main expense categories. As of February 2023, professional services account for 48% of GVB's overall cost. These costs are associated with promoting Guam tourism to other source markets. Professional services also include TAF projects, such as firework displays, drone shows, and beautification projects, as well as operational costs, such as Tumon's landscaping, security, and other expenses. GVB personnel and its related employee benefit costs are outlined on the screen. These comprise 14% and 8% respectively of GVB's overall cost. A total of $1.7 million, or 30% of overall costs, is for other expenses. These costs relate to grants provided to local organizations, sponsorships for cultural and sports events, and operational items such as utilities and repairs and maintenance. To conclude, majority of GVB's funds are invested in efforts to promote Guam and marketing efforts to revitalize the tourism industry. I will now turn over the presentation to Attorney Joseph McDonald, who will discuss the GVB board and membership.
Please proceed.
Buenas and Hafa Day, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today at the Oversight hearing. And I also want to thank the chairman for his kind comments on management's efforts to get to the bottom of certain issues, as well as the stewardship and oversight of the Bureau by the management team, and especially the committee and the chairwoman today for organizing this oversight. I'll begin by stating that with respect to the investigation, if there are going to be substantive comments or questions that may come from the committee, I will respectfully decline to get into any details about the report that may be in the report, and I will address only process or other matters that are collateral to what went on, for instance, the role of the BRCC. I do so in minding my professional obligations, as well as my role in the Bureau as legal counsel. And I do want to emphasize that as attorneys, we have to respect the process, let it play out, as well as the rights of people involved and of the agency. The role of counsel is a delicate role, especially in this situation, where I actually serve both the GM and the board and must at all times keep the best interests of the Bureau in mind. I'm not a policymaker, and so all I do is call balls and strikes. Now,
Point of order. Madam Chair, is the gentleman raising a privilege of some sort? Absent the existence of a privilege, he'll have to answer the questions.
I can't hear you, Senator Fisher.
I said, a point of order. Is the gentleman raising a privilege as legal counsel for GVB? If no privilege exists, he must answer the questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, as was mentioned by both the board chair and the president, and I'd like to just also mention for the record that this report was not included on our agenda. We received it just last night, and so this is not something that is on today's agenda. And we know that it has also been forwarded to other authorities for investigation, and so pending those investigations, we will address it at a later time if it is fit.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I was under the impression this was an oversight hearing.
This is an oversight hearing with a specific agenda.
There's valid information before us that is relevant to this oversight.
Yes, it's not included on the agenda, once again, Senator Fisher, and this report has also been forwarded for further investigation to authorities, and so we will give respect to that process, and the Oversight Committee will address it at a proper time. You may proceed, Mr. McDonald.
thank you. I just want to address Senator Fisher's comment, as well as discussing sort of the lawyer-to-lawyer thing. If compelled, I will testify. These are all voluntary statements. But if compelled, I will testify as to the substance.
So do I understand you'll require a subpoena?
If compelled, sir. I am hoping that the best result and the best interests of the Bureau come out of all of this. And I think transparency and knowledge is important, and I think it's also important that everyone has a few minutes to digest, at least a few minutes to digest exactly what's in the report. Everyone, including those who are named in the report. I'm just respecting the process, sir. Thank you. So, board and membership. A little bit of the history of the Bureau for those who are unaware. The Bureau is a wonderful agency. It began, I believe, in the 50s with an executive order from Governor Guerrero creating a committee. And it's morphed from that to what we have today, which is probably one of the more unique agencies in the entire government of Guam, and I would say that it's looks to me to be unique to almost any other polity. From what was completely a governor-driven agency with appointees solely under the control of the governor, we have what we have today, which is a public, non-stock, non-profit membership corporation where there are some unique features of an agency. It looks almost like a government agency, but it's supposed to be a corporation. And in that respect, there is some intent you can see in the Enabling Act to create a corporate structure. I will say that from a legal perspective, it's a very unique, and I would say even inchoate corporate structure. And by that I mean the board itself is comprised of not everyone from membership. You have the biggest stakeholder actually being the governor of Guam. She appoints 5 members to the board. The next biggest stake is actually industry, which is the membership. They get to elect 4 members. The next biggest stake will be the speaker and the legislature. They have 2 members and 1 alternate who sits in the event that one of the 12 is missing. You also have, finally, what you see on other boards, including private boards, where the board members themselves get to create or fill a position on the board of directors. Now, what's interesting about the board of directors, let me just finish the discussion on the slide. There are 209 members, so each member is allowed to have up to 10 voting rights, okay? So that's why you see 209 members, but for instance, PHR has 240 votes. That is a little bit unique, and what's also unique about the voting rights is that although you see in corporate organizations, the rule is to allow for cumulative voting to give greater representation to membership. In the Enabling Act, there is no cumulative voting allowed. For those who may not know a lot about corporate law, cumulative voting allows you to put all of your votes towards any one seat and do that for each seat. The way it's structured at GVB, that's not allowed. And most states, for private corporations, I haven't looked at the question in public corporations, but in private corporations, they actually prefer cumulative voting because it allows for greater representation in membership. That's taken away. In the membership profile, you see that there are 240 PHR company votes, and United votes make up 50. So that means 43% of the membership is spread amongst either individuals or companies. And I would say they're not it's not that they're not represented, they're underrepresented, okay? The total board of directors, it says there's 13, there's actually 12, but you have 1 alternate who only fills in when the selection is made, or excuse me, when one of the members is missing. Now, the other thing that's unique about the board makeup is that what's required under the Enabling Act is that the directors themselves have to be, except for the mayors, they have to be members of the industry, active participation in the industry. So amongst the governor's appointees, the legislative appointees, and the membership and selected, we're looking for members of the industry. Now, if you take a step back, what you see is a consistent stakeholder interest in industry, although appointed from different areas. So substance over form, you'll say that it's mostly comprised of members in the industry. Okay. The BRCC, in my prior life as counsel for institutions, financial institutions and other large entities, what you have is regulation which requires that the companies have more robust controls around financial operations and a higher degree of transparency and actual responsibility by statute in the CEO and the financial controller and those types of things. So what we've tried to do in the Bureau is import what most people will see as sort of an audit committee, okay? But the BRCC is a little bit more than that, because the audit committee is really only sort of interested in the external audit. The BRCC is an ongoing feature that I've advised management is a good thing to have, because it keeps a stock of all of the material business issues that come across management's purview. And by doing that, you demonstrate control. And if you're really going to do this the right way, what you do is you have what they call a corrective action. You have a root cause analysis, and then after that root cause analysis, you have a corrective action based on what you believe is the root cause of these issues. And that's what the BRCC is designed to do. And what was really interesting is that when the tensions first started to rise, what I tried to do is let management and the board sort of do what they're supposed to do and work out their differences. And we tried that for a time, and I don't think they were able to negotiate their way through some of the impasses. And so when I started to look at the root cause of some of these issues, what I noticed was that the bylaws, and just a second on the bylaws, really the bylaws in and of themselves is the rule set for governance and procedure. It should not be the rule set to create any other rights, responsibilities, duties, or charges, or disable them in and of themselves. It's really just a procedural tool, and you shouldn't be creating any substantive rights. And if you get into the corporate law on some of this stuff, you'll see that this is a natural tension, that the board and the stockholders often have litigation, derivative litigation and direct litigation, because of these rights that are that tend to be encroached on through bylaws. And I think that's what we saw in these bylaws with GVB. The second amended bylaws themselves are actually a lot like the first amended bylaws. So if you are convinced with the analysis, what you have is that the bylaws have been wrong for a long time. A long time. Probably since the origination of the bylaws. And I think I did look at that, and I noticed that the language was there, and perhaps the best way to describe it is to compare GVB's bylaws with other agency bylaws. And when you compare the language in GVB's bylaws, when you not bylaws, but Enabling Act, when you compare the GVB Enabling Act with other agencies' Enabling Acts, what you find is that whereas other agencies, GURA, GITA, KGTF, Guam Housing, whereas those agencies, you actually have language that gives the power to the directors themselves. That is absent from GVB. So what that tells you is that the board members themselves must act through management and employees. And then you see that in the rest of the Enabling Act, which is that the board can only give an instruction or a directive to management or employees upon a resolution, okay? And A resolution as, and what's really interesting is that we even had a great discussion with management and the board at one of the past meetings on what is exactly a resolution. We take that all for granted. But really, a resolution, the best way to describe it is that the resolution is a more formal, and if you're acting on behalf of the corporation and you're exercising one of the powers or duties of the corporation, then you actually need to have a discussion in an open government meeting where you flesh out all the issues and you do this parliamentary procedure where everybody gets their say and then there's a motion made and the resolution's developed and ultimately voted on. Whereas what we had been doing in the past, and we looked at this question since 2014, is that there were no resolutions other than sort of to commend people about good things that they've done type of resolutions. But no resolutions for actual action on behalf of the corporation as directed by the board. Instead, what you had is motions. And to listen to management, sometimes these motions would come out without any real substantive deliberation. So when I took a look at that, and I listened to it, and I looked at the bylaws, and I compared the bylaws to what is included in the Enabling Act, we see the first glaring incongruence is the language around the powers of the board. The bylaws themselves give the powers of the board. Now, the Enabling Act allows the Bureau to give powers to the board. If you look at in Section 9105, I believe, there's two provisions. One provision says that the Bureau can give its powers to the board or a committee of the board pursuant to passage of any regulation. Okay? What that tells me is if we only took the bylaws and had that as regulation, then we would have been okay. But instead, they were passed only through resolution and board action, which means that anything that goes in excess of the Enabling Act would be what the governor is describing as an ultra vires act. And really, the offensive language in the bylaws, offensive from a legal standpoint, is that the bylaws themselves purport, now there's some limiting language subject to the laws, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but it purports to give powers solely to the board. That does not exist in the Enabling Act, and there's been no regulation. So to me, the genesis of what may have developed over time is rooted in the bylaws. And it looks like it's allowing direct action by board members individually or as a group to give direct orders and authorities, orders and authorities to management or employees. And we see that from time to time because, after all, what we have are directors who are cloaked with apparent authority to do so. And when you're an employee and you see a director, you can't help but saying, oh my goodness, that's a director, we got to do this. But really what needs to happen, it needs to be channeled either through a resolution or through management. Once I determined and had discussions with management about the incongruencies in the bylaws, we began as part of the BRCC process. So the BRCC, all material issues, including whether you need an investigation, analysis, corrective action planning, it all comes under the rubric of the charge of the BRCC. And once that was done, what we did, and this is on, and hopefully the committee has copies of this, but it's available at the website. What I did was did a side-by-side analysis of the bylaws against the Enabling Act. And the first step on that is to, and I'll guide those of us who want a little bit more information about the technique behind the analysis. we have to come up with what law is going to take precedent over what law. And of course, I didn't put it in there, but everybody knows supreme law of the land is the Organic Act, right? But for the purposes of this discussion, really the first primary law to consider in looking at the bylaws would be the Enabling Act. The second law that would take greatest consideration is going to be all the applicable administrative laws, procurement laws, open government laws, FOIA, that sort of thing. And then after that, because it's in the Enabling Act, the General Corporation Law. But even with respect to the General Corporation Law, if you look at the Enabling Act, it's only taking certain provisions of the General Corporation Law. And as legal analysts, what's really interesting is that if you look at the powers of a board in the General Corporation Law, they stuck it into the bylaws. But again, that didn't come from the Enabling Act. It came from a secondary source. So there's some argument that there's powers there, but it's not in the Enabling Act. And to be safe, what you need is to have regulation. So after that side-by-side analysis, it became clear that there were a number of features in the bylaws that fell outside of and made the incongruency with the Enabling Act. And there were a number of provisions that we saw, some of them fairly innocuous, and some of them more material about what the differences are. For instance, in the Enabling Act, it says that the Bureau can control where the Bureau is, or excuse me, the board can control where the Bureau stays, where its address is. I don't think that's going to be allowed when compared to what the legislative power is about where real property is for the government. So that seems a little fairly innocuous because, of course, if there's going to be any change of address, it seems to me like some matter of that is going to come to the attention of the legislature. But there are more important provisions other than just the powers. For instance, in the Enabling Act, there is no provision for a secretary or a treasurer. But in the bylaws, the secretary and the treasurer were created, and in fact, some risk is created, and I talk about risks a lot, because some risks were created in the bylaws by conferring powers on the treasurer and the secretary that do not exist in the Enabling Act. Some of those powers include the power to sign on contracts and procurements. Doesn't exist in the Enabling Act. That creates a risk for board members. My job is also to preserve the board's authorities. And now what we have is a document which says, oh, you can do these things. Am I running out of time? Okay. I tend to talk too much. So after that comparison, what we did was I started to draft third amended bylaws. And really, when you look at the third amended bylaws, even though they haven't been passed, all I did was take the baseline legal authorized activity you see in the Enabling Act, and I tried to graft it onto the third amended bylaws, okay? And I tried to be very specific. And I think one of the things that's lost is that oftentimes what you'll see is lawyers who tend to advise private industry are a little more creative with the laws, and if a law doesn't say something, then oftentimes what you'll see is the lawyer will say, go ahead and do it. When you advise government agencies, you tend to be a little more conservative, and if the law doesn't say you can do it, there's a great risk that's created if you advise the agency that it can do something. So I started to draft third amended bylaws, even though it's not a governance document, it's only a proposed governance document. It does provide for a baseline on sort of how we can look at the governance from a corporate perspective of the Bureau itself. Once this was done, and there we did several iterations, once this was done, as part of the BRCC, the GM wisely decided, you know, even though there's this thing that's going on with the board, the best thing to do is to invite one of the board members at least to have a say in what is going on in the redrafting of the bylaws. And so thank you for Director Jones for participating in the BRCC. He had some very, very good comments, and we were able to put together third amended bylaws after a couple of rounds of discussions. And at our last meeting as a BRCC, Director Jones said he would support the bylaws. Of course, what's also interesting about the bylaws is that everybody thinks that it belongs to the board. It actually belongs to the membership. And what's really interesting about that is the only way the governor and the speaker can have a say in what's going on is at the director level, even though the membership votes on the corporate bylaws. So we can now see sort of the tensions and the disparate interests that might come arise from even just promulgating bylaws. Next slide, please. Was that it? Okay. I'll be happy to take any questions on that short presentation.
We will move on to questions later, but Mr. Perez, please proceed.
Thank you, Senator. What I'm going to present, some of you might have heard in like one of our board meetings already, but I think it bears repeating for the purpose this morning of the oversight record. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about destination development and what's happening in that area, and then bring you up to date on our tourism recovery progress to date. So, as I mentioned before, the two strategic destination challenges that we really have as a community is, first of all, aligning our destination visitor experiences with post-COVID consumer expectations. There's a new paradigm post-COVID where there's greater reliance on a digitized environment, and we have a long way to go as a community to really upscale our own digitized environment, and I'll go into that a little bit later. So the industry globally is shifting from a market-driven emphasis to more and more of a destination management philosophy, which basically means that you are developing the reason to promote a destination rather than trying to con them, so to speak, into coming just with marketing gimmicks. So at the root of this is really being able to deliver the promised experience on products and service, and especially cultural identity and authenticity, particularly with respect to the Chamorro heritage and culture. Right now, as I said earlier, we're lacking the ability to harvest the benefits of our customers coming to Guam in terms of their spending. As you know, the Wi-Fi operating environment is ubiquitous in our source markets of Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. And the whole hospitality industry is migrating more toward smartphone, online operating environments where a lot of it is self-driven by the customers themselves. The second thing is, from an industry perspective, particularly in the hospitality industry, new solutions are replacing legacy systems to improve efficiency, drive automation, allow employees to focus more on added value of the experience, and relieve staff from routine, time-consuming tasks. So there's wider use and application of hotel apps, for example, concierge service, even managing net day stays and yields, even scheduling employees. Believe it or not, the hospitality industry now has what they call gig employees, where they can only work 2 or 3 hours a day for certain days, and that's built into their scheduling because of the shortage of manpower. I would say that Guam tourism and the value chain here is really lagging far behind expectations of our source markets. And so we need to really, as a community, upgrade our digitized capacity. Contactless payments, for example, is a very typical one. Just by way of an example, just 2 years ago, based on a Korean survey, 55% of them coming to Guam have cash. Today, hardly anybody brings cash. They're relying on digitized mobile payments. And so if a vendor or a store is not able to transact business that way, we all lose out. So other trends in the industry, that the global social commerce of goods and services bought and sold is now more and more directly done in social media platforms, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, or Pinterest, TikTok, and that's because it's a quicker path to transactions, circumventing the business websites. Global social commerce, for example, is about close to $500 billion in 2021, and this is expected to triple to $1.2 trillion by 2025. So you see, in a couple years, more and more of these transactions are going to rely on social media, and our ability, therefore, to step into the digitized environment becomes more important. Just by way of a practical example, we had developed this electronic declaration form at the height of the COVID pandemic, because more and more visitors are expecting touchless environments, right? And so we're able to do this at the airport, where now, using your electronic declaration form, you can practically go there and within 5 to 10 seconds be out of there. About 70 to 80% of our source markets are taking advantage of that. Unfortunately, our local residents are still about 20% use. And I think probably most of these are either business people traveling, but for the most part, our local residents aren't quite accustomed to that as well. So the bottom line is basically two questions on destination. Are we delivering the destination experience? How's our service culture? What are we doing about brand integrity and our cultural authenticity? What about our public infrastructure, beaches and parks? I know that President Gutierrez and the team have done a lot outside the scope of GVB to actually do a lot of improvements in the parks and improve a lot of the look of these parks that are highly visited by customers. And so the other thing is public safety and security, not just physical security, but health and hygiene. The second question is, are we prepared to facilitate cashless transactions using mobile devices as the tourism and travel industry becomes more highly digitized? Conversation I had with a JCB representative on Guam said that he did a survey of 2,000 businesses on Guam who honor JCB cards. Unfortunately, very few of them are capable of accepting digital wallets. So in terms of the destination issues, the destinations today are shifting more and more from marketing to a destination focus where we promote more authenticity in our product. And GVB is doing this right now in terms of intensifying our destination development and management activities. With greater emphasis, we've become a destination management organization providing our visitors and local people opportunities to interact with one another, providing the destination experience, because when visitors come here, they just don't want to come here to be passively engaged. They want to actually interact with what makes Guam a unique destination. We are intensifying the reasons to visit Guam, delivering the destination experience, and promoting interaction more and more between residents and visitors. This includes like our gift program. This is the Guam Fiesta Tour program where we bring visitors to interact with our local community in Fiesta environment. And I'm going to ask also Nico if you got a couple minutes just to come here and talk a little bit about this one village, one transaction, or one attraction program that you're working on.
Thank you, Jerry. Hafaday, Madam Chair, Senators. I'll make this very brief, but I promise this is the fun part of the presentation. So the One Village, One Attraction initiative that has been born in the middle of the pandemic was really the Bureau's honest look into an inward-outward approach on how do we bring back this destination, the experiences that not only our visitors have, but our local people. How do we bring back island pride to a new level that addresses a lot of the things that we've been talking about? And what we came up with is the One Village, One Attraction, where GVB is now working hand in hand with the Mayor's Council of Guam, the municipal planning councils, and all these different villages to develop attractions that will become assets of that community. And that asset would therefore create new jobs within that community, create a new experience for our locals and our visitors, and it'll generate revenue so that our Mayor's Council can start to improve infrastructure or things that they need. You know, them being the gateway to the people of Guam was really a great approach for us to engage with them and learn that we could be the oversight of these unique attractions throughout the island. Go ahead and click on the effect just so the other ones come up. And I wanted to just give some examples of what we're talking about, but at the end of the day, when this plan is solidified, and I'm looking to finish this by the end of this year, we would have 19 unique attractions and reasons to visit Guam. And they're all rooted in culture. There's education involved. There's obviously embracing technology to perpetuate that culture. And a lot of this really goes back to our mission of using the tourism industry to derive maximum benefits for our people. So we wanted to break down the barriers of this us versus them mentality and show the communities that having tourism or tourists in your village isn't necessarily a bad thing if it generates revenue for you that improves your basketball courts or your gyms or the street lights or the bus stops. We wanted to give all of these villages an opportunity to take pride and ownership in an attraction that we can therefore as GVB go out and market to our international markets. What this does is it creates an entire destination experience rather than just a Tumon-centric experience is what we've been trying to move away from. So in talking about Jerry's points earlier, this is our plan to address that. How do we move the visitors throughout the island and share in the benefits for our community? Well, we have to start giving anchors and attractions for our people to start mobilizing. I know in the middle of the pandemic, a lot of us rarely went around the island. And some people on the island said they haven't been to the village of Inalahan in like 20 years. And why? Because there isn't really a reason to go down there. So we need to start creating authentic reasons rooted in our culture to inspire our people first to go around. If we want visitors to explore the island, we need to bring it back and understand that we have to put our local community first. And that's what this plan does. I'm sure you guys are going to have a lot of questions after, so I'll keep it brief.
Thank you, Nico. The original strategic goal was to create a major attraction that can generate market share in our source markets. And the original concept, if you recall, was to really have this smart park development in Ipao or in Tumon. That met a lot of resistance, particularly from the historic preservation people. And so we still are faithful to our two strategic goals, but we've just shifted from one location to the whole island. The two strategic goals, number one, is to create a large enough critical mass of attraction that can generate market share movement in our markets. And the second is to create and to institutionalize our ability to perpetuate the Chamorro culture. So instead of doing it in one location now, it's going to be harder to execute, but it's the right thing to do to transform our center stage of tourism from Tumon Bay to the whole island. And that's the reason for this one product, one attraction. So we're basically opening up the whole island to be the island experience instead of what visitors see through the prism of Tumon. So let me just go on now and just share some of the things that are happening on this. We are going to have the Guam Cocoa Road race starting next week, and I believe Senator Shelton, you're going to be the front runner for the 10K. Anyway, so we have that coming. We also have the Guam Micronesia Island Fair on the 12th to the 14th of May. And this is just a collage of some of the festivals that have been going on now in terms of bringing the experience to the village level, whether it's in Agana, Jigo, or Mariso. These are some images on a very successful kind of interaction between visitors and our local people. This is just a glimpse of what we had participated in for the last Christmas. And this is what I was referring to earlier about a lot of these improvements and renovation, even though it's not our job to do it, a lot of these places are visited by visitors. So GVB has taken upon itself to spend money to really make these improvements. Okay. So I hope that gives you enough images. Now, the last point I wanted to go over is tourism recovery. Okay, on a, first of all, starting on a global basis, Japan is 8% and is really underperforming the benchmark so far, unlike Korea, which is overperforming the benchmark through the first quarter. IATA forecasts for pre-COVID passenger volume would recover in 2024. There are some regional variations, and in particular, the Asia Pacific and Caribbean are forecast to reach pre-COVID levels in 2025. So that's kind of the backdrop. It's not like what we can control or not control. It is what it is. It's not necessarily what we want it to be, but it is what we have to deal with. And part of this has to do with the very slow removal of travel restrictions in our source markets. I mentioned earlier that, or at least President Kroll mentioned earlier, the possible restrictions to be eased in Japan in May. And if they lift the restrictions on May to like regular pandemic conditions, that would stimulate the consumer mindset that's been holding them back. We are getting FIT travel from Japan right now, but we don't have the scale that the group market and the package market can generate. So in the fiscal year to date, from October to March 25th, you can see that in Japan, we're still about 9% of pre-COVID. Korea is beating 50, it's 56% now. And of course, the US and Hawaii have not changed much, including the Philippines. They're pretty much close to pre-COVID levels. Just the first 3 months of this fiscal year, there's a little bit of improvement in Japan, 11%, and much more improvement in Korea, pre-COVID arrivals of 62%. And I guess put another way, this is the world. If you look at the dotted green line, that's pre-COVID level. And if you look at the left side of the screen, which is the Americas, they're 6% above pre-COVID level, and the Middle East is like 24%. But the rest of the world is still under pre-COVID level. And the real bogey here for us to look at is Northeast Asia, because that's our main market. And if you look at it closely, you can see that overall we're 30% behind, that we're 70% of what we're going to be by next year. If you look at Japan, Korea, and Taiwan, Korea is minus 18%, so that's within the 19% bogey. But what's driving this 30% down is the 32% in Japan and 25% in Taiwan that is not kicking in yet. And that's got nothing to do with what we do other than just the source market conditions. So as we forecast just from October through February this year, we're looking basically at a run rate of 30% better than our original forecast. This is a better look at it. As you can see, the blue line in the bottom is fiscal 22. The current fiscal year is the green line dotted on top of it, and you can see that our actual arrivals are beating expectations. And you can see that by 2024 and 25, we should come close to the FY19 level. So by way of recap, we are about 3.8% pre-COVID in 2021. We are close to 30% for 2022. In fact, we're 30-something% better than the 28% we originally forecasted. And this is because of the strict border controls that are starting to ease up now in Japan and Korea. As I mentioned before, Japan COVID condition 2 is going to change to condition 5, which is more of a normal flu season after Golden Week. The backloading of our projection is basically toward the third and fourth quarter. A little bit of concern here, however, because originally the domestic support for domestic tourism in Japan was to expire in March. And we learned that it's going to be extended through the summer, so that might have a little bit of a drag. But nonetheless, we're very optimistic that the back end of the fiscal year or the summer months, Japan will start kicking in greater number. So we forecast for the current year 40% of pre-COVID levels. And then we have an optimistic forecast of 70% of pre-COVID levels for next year, which would be around 900 to 1 million packs. Consumer travel trends, of course, are changing. There's more and more leisure travel growing, where extra days are added to business trips, and we need to take advantage of that, particularly some of our U.S. visitors here who come for business or military. More and more of them are starting to come and tagging on an extra day or two, bringing the family. The other thing I mentioned earlier is the digitization of tourism in its value chain. This is intensifying a lot more quickly than I think our community is adjusting to. And so we need to do a better job with that angle. There's increasing importance in social media and influencers. And I know that it's not very popular to think of Gen Z and millennials as good paying customers, but we found that these are gateway generations. So what they do with their social media, they may not spend as much money as their rich parents or associates, but they're very, very social media savvy, and this communicates with the other demographics, and that's why we call it a gateway generation, because a lot of the social media content is impacting actual travel destination bookings in the other demographics. So that gives you kind of a quick overview on where we are today on recovery and destination management, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Thank you to everyone who provided the updates today. I'd like to also invite any of the board members who are here if they'd like to join the panel for the Q&A. And recognize them for being here today, Mr. Sunny Atta, Mr. Ken Cook, and Mr. Jeff Jones. Thank you very much. We'll begin with questions for the panel. I know that you answered many of my questions here today, and in the interest of time, I'd like to yield to my colleagues first to get in their questions. So we'll begin with the Vice Chair, Senator Lujan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, do we have a time limit? Or do we? No, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm very courteous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good morning, gentlemen. How's everybody doing? Let me start off with Mr. McDonald. Mr. McDonald, your previous life, were you not the deputy counsel for City Corp?
I was a Deputy General Counsel for a business within Citigroup, that's correct.
Were you at one time the Chief Prosecutor for the Attorney General's office?
Yes, that's right. I was Chief Prosecutor under Attorney General Elizabeth Barrett Anderson.
In your capacity as Chief Prosecutor for the Attorney General's office, did you ever prosecute any cases that involved the circumventing of the open government law?
I was part of a prosecution that is initiated through, at the time, Chief Prosecutor Philip Tydinko. And so I participated in that prosecution, that's correct.
Okay, so, but you were involved in the prosecution of violation of open government laws in the government of Guam, right?
Yes, and that was also a combined effort with the Federal Bureau of
Okay,
Investigations.
thank you very much. In your testimony, you were talking about, of course, talking about bylaws and enabling legislation, okay? You had said that you were in the third draft of bylaws, and how bylaws and enabling legislation are not merging, and one bylaw is basically kind of overshadowing enabling legislation. Did I hear it correctly?
I think the word we've been using is incongruent.
Incongruent, okay, incongruent, same difference. That being said, Mr. McDonald, you also said that in order for board members to get anything passed through, it has to be done through resolution?
That's correct.
Okay. You also said that you were questioned by board members what a resolution is?
Yeah, there's a great deal of discussion that we had, a very helpful and robust discussion about the difference between a resolution and a motion.
Okay.
And when would one be required over the other?
Okay. That being said, the enabling legislation says things have to be done through resolution, right?
Yes, that's correct. That's what
Okay.
the enabling legislation
Okay.
says.
So if board members are inquiring what a resolution is, it's safe to assume that resolutions have not been adhered to in order to get things done.
In our review of the corporate records, there appeared to be, at least since 2014, no substantive resolutions.
Okay, so therefore, again, it wasn't adhered to. The enabling legislation has not been adhered to.
There looks to be a gap, yes.
It looks to be a gap. Same difference. Okay. Houston, we have a problem. That being said, I mean, and I would honor the chairman's request in not going into the findings, the BRCC findings, and likewise yourself. But I need to remind the members here that one of the duties of the People's House is the oversight. It's the oversight. This is the People's House. This is the People's Courtroom. This is the legislative courtroom. Earlier, President Guterres said that he was going to come to the People's House and ask the People's Purse for $26 million. Based on what you have said, based on, and I'm just going to generalize. I'm not going to go. I'm going to honor that in the sense that my colleagues haven't had the opportunity to receive the findings, and likewise, I have not had sufficient time to digest these findings. So I'm just going to generalize based on the floodgates that you guys opened, Mr. McDonald and Mr. Chu, saying that, because you quoted the report, or basically, and I didn't. I wasn't going to go down that way, giving the opportunity for my colleagues to digest it, but you had mentioned it, so I'm going to just generalize with that. The requests, you're asking for requests. Based on some of the findings here, well, first of all, Mr. McDonald, do you stand by these findings?
To the extent that I've had and invested time and effort and triple-checked and quadruple-checked what we have in there, then yes. Of course, no one's perfect. The reason why they were amended is there was a couple of incorrect legal conclusions. So I thought that it was, and I advised management that it was a good idea that we make a corrective. And the corrective was that, one of the laws didn't apply that we thought applied, but I don't think it changes the material conclusions in the report.
Okay. President Gutierrez, do you stand by the findings of the BRCC report?
Sorry. After numerous discussions and rehashing with the legal counsel and top management and some board members, yes, I do stand on it because I've got to be able to rely on the amount of time and resources that the council put in there, plus other people that he had helping him. And I agree with it. And I stand by it.
Well, likewise, Chairman Chu had also congratulated you guys on a job well done in regards to the findings. So that being said, I'm sure everybody's in agreement that they stand by this report. As legislators, it is upsetting, actually. Again, my colleagues have not had the opportunity to review the findings, but I find it pretty upsetting in some of the findings with this report. And with that being said, I'm just going to say that there needs to be corrective measures. You're taking corrective actions now with the third round of bylaws. I know Senator Tello has a corrective measure, and I'm sure she'll be talking about that. I'll let her talk about that. So does the AG as well. Yeah, absolutely. That being said, for another time and date to talk directly about these findings, we can't sweep this under the rug. I don't think the people of Guam will want to sweep this under the rug. Not at all. Earlier, in the confirmation hearing with Mayor Hoffman, we discussed about the situation in Hawaii, where their Visitors Bureau they're looking at dissolving the Visitors Bureau, and one of the reasons is it demonstrated how Hawaii's tourism authority is non-compliance with state procurement code. It's not me saying that. I read it. Some of the findings here are in violation of the procurement code. And so that being said, we're going to be debating, we're going to be looking at the budget, and I'm 100% part of the Vice Chair of Tourism. I want to 100% support you, whatever it is that you need. But people need the accounting of where these monies are going to, and how these monies are being expended. Just to move on and say, no, I'm a big fan. No, it doesn't sit with, not in this house. We're the purse strings of the government of Guam. This is a third co-equal branch of government. So please, you would, again, understand that we are going to be determining how much monies agencies get. What is disturbing of all this, and we're sitting here talking about numbers, and that's fantastic, it's great, I applaud all your efforts. Last week we were sitting in this hallowed halls, and the Department of Administration wrote you guys off. There is not one mention on the sustainability of Guam based on your guys' efforts. Not one. Not one. We asked numerous times, did we not? Not one. Everything was dependent on military buildup, Section 30, EITC. Everything was dependent on that. And that being said, I'm going, you guys are going to come here and ask for money. I said, wow. And the Department of Administration has written you guys off. We want to support you 100%. But also, this scathing report We need to fix it. It's got to be fixed. And it looks like we're going to have to fix some major stuff on our side. It may be for another day. Council McDonald, do you agree that it needs to be a fix from the legislature side?
I don't call policy, I only call balls and strikes. There are definitely, I think what needs to happen is sort of taking stock of what the ultimate goals are and ensuring that any fixes attend to the root cause of any issues that come out. Again, the agency it started out really as part of the Chamber of Commerce that Governor Guerrero created the Tourism Commission.
Through executive order, right?
Through executive order. And now what we have is actually really neat agency because we do need participation in industry.
Sure.
Absolutely. I think where the legislature may want to take a look at are the outputs of the funding sources going to what the agency is deciding to do, and making sure that the legislature intends that that's the result. And so that's a long way of saying it kind of depends what we're really talking about. And as lawyers, we try to be careful about what specifically, what facts specifically are we talking about, what considerations, what policy considerations. We don't make policy, we only help facilitate them and point out the risks. So from your perspective, Mr. Vice Chair of the committee, I would say, yeah, probably we need to take a look at some of that and make sure that this $26 million budget, whatever, who's controlling it and how it's being controlled. If that's the intent of the legislature, then the voters have to be the ultimate deciders on that. If it's not the intent of the legislature, then there needs to be some changes to the structure of the organization, how it's run. And I will say this, when there's tension, it's actually a good thing from an organizational standpoint because the different interests are coming together and saying, wait a minute, we need to work this one out. So in that sense, I would say it's been healthy. Now that we've had the healthy discussion, the legislature may want to take a look at what the desired outputs from the agency are, and is the legislation getting us there? Is the money getting us there?
Would you say the findings are healthy? I mean, other than the finding itself, you say that the status quo business is healthy?
I don't think I said that.
No, I'm just saying. But you think the BCC report is a healthy report? I mean, it is in the sense where corrective measures will be done, but the report itself and the way it's been operating, is that healthy?
I think any time that the transparency is given, that's healthy. And you don't like it. Doctor gives you a prescription, you don't like it. Or doctor gives you a diagnosis, you don't like it. But guess what? It's good for you.
Okay.
So from that perspective, and from the legal perspective, the more alignment you have, the more one-sided it is. As you've seen in this great body, it's a deliberative body. It's made out of the different parties. And so that's healthy. That synthesis of perspectives is healthy. That's democracy. What we have here is corporate democracy, a hybrid corporate democracy, but the constituency all the way up to those who are charged with governing and those who are charged with executing, there's going to be tensions. But the more that we can align to a point, I think that the mission is good. And this is our #1 driver of the economy. So it's like anything else. I'm part of the Criminal Law Review Commission, and we're hoping that's an ongoing review of the laws because the laws are breathing, living things. They're not dead things. So you think of GVB, you think of a living, breathing, evolving agency, corporation that serves the people's goods. So continual tinkering is a good, healthy thing. It means it's a living, breathing organization. So in that sense, if transparency gets us there, then hallelujah.
I don't think this report, you want to enhance that, this report enhance the, more opportunities to happen. Anyway, President Gutierrez, you were once in this house, this hallowed halls, and you served as governor as well.
Yes.
Do you see in your capacity now as president of GVB as being an insider now as opposed to a governor and being part of the legislature? Do you see that there are changes that need to be made in this hallowed halls?
I believe, Mr. Vice Chairman, that we got to this point because when I first came into GVB with Mr. Parrish, we followed what was going on all the time. Documents are sent to me, certified to do these things, but 2 years later we find out that that they were doing it wrong, and in some cases following illegal ways of doing things. And then it was like an epiphany when I found out that that laws have changed, but management did not realize that and kept following the old laws. Now, finding those things out later, what do we do with it? And so, for example, you brought up something that was very, very telling, that we weren't even discussed or even included in the overall contributing factor to the economy. We were just left out. I think, and when I see a reporter saying, GVB is shooting for the moon for $29 million, they don't really realize that we are not like a regular operational part of the government. We are actually competing with places like Hawaii and other destinations that are putting out more millions than we do, but they don't seem to understand that. We're not shooting for the moon. We came in with the same budget last year and was summarily cut by almost $8 million, and they wanted to balance the budget, but the chairman, Senator San Augustine, saw fit that okay, we'll cut and we'll try to survive with that, and we did not only survive, but we excel. The key here is that he also saw fit that if in fact we succeed and that we did more to bring in more money, and we did better than anticipated, that those funds should go back to GVB so that we can effectively compete and get more in, and that's what's happening right now. But sometimes we fight the people over there of saying, well, I don't know if there's any cash to give you what the law says I should give you. So we're kind of put on a lower scale. But if they just wake up and realize that we're competing with big boys out there for the tourism market out of Japan, for example. Hawaii is putting out a lot of money to entice people to fly to Hawaii, or even Korea. Korea is #1 for the Japanese tourists. We're fighting those things, but and I'm glad that you saw that we're just left to our own devices on how we're going to be successful. And we are more than successful. Just Jerry and the whole group here of GVB, who's been there for dozens of years. I keep saying that Nadine's been there 40 years, and Dee herself. But they're there, and they know just how well we did. We're taking upon ourselves to go out there and clean up the parks. That's not our responsibility. We're expending hundreds of thousands of dollars to clean up Laddystone Park. Nobody goes there anymore. But we took it upon ourselves to go to Apugan, Fort Apugan, and to do the Triangle Park, because that's where people go. And if we're inviting people here, and they come here and they see that, I mean, it's egg on our faces. So the key here is that I think tourism, I am glad that you've brought it up, that we don't seem to be in that priority of saying, hey, let's give them the fuel to really raise our economy back up. And we're going to be, this summer, believe me, that when when on May 8th, the level in Japan moves the COVID down to regular flu-like, and the Japanese tourists get accustomed to saying that they can now leave their country and travel to Guam. We want the money to be able to compete. And not only are we going to compete to bring them here, we are even partnering up with Palau, for example. Palau has some assets that Guam can avail themselves to. For example, in Palau, they have open skies with Singapore. They have open skies with Papua New Guinea and Brisbane. And if we can take that asset they have, plus our United States asset here, and couple that up for sustainability for Palau, Micronesia, for our people here too. They can go to Singapore via Palau or Papua New Guinea or Brisbane. That's what we're trying to do, is we're thinking outside the box and to bring people in to have sustainable tourists coming in. And I'm glad that even you are trying to figure out how to get the cabotage laws waived for at least a certain period of time. When I was governor, I put a lot of time and resources into extending that one runway to 12,000 feet so that we can have nonstop flights from Guam to the west coast of the United States.
And we have that now.
It completed on the 15th of 2015, but it's very hardly used because Hawaii doesn't want to be overflown. United Airlines doesn't want to use it because the cash cow is Hawaii. I mean, we're paying 30 cents a seat mile to go to Honolulu. In 2019, we had 98,000 people flying from Guam to Honolulu. They didn't even feed them until two years later when we kept making noise. You know, we can't call ourselves this. This is our hometown carrier, and yet you don't feed our own people going there. So this is where I'm really happy that maybe we can all get together. Governor Liu can take the lead with the legislature, GVB, go to the Department of Transportation and ask for that waiver. You were very successful in 2006 when you didn't get the passenger waiver, but you did get the cargo waiver. Unfortunately, for 2 years, they were taken by surprise that there were just not enough aircraft that are fully available for cargo only, because they can't just put cargo on the belly and compete. So we didn't apply for it after 2008. But we can go back there now. AIT, Taiwan, is waiting for that because not only is it going to serve Guam well, it's going to serve Palau well to raise their economy for national security, not only for Taiwan, but the national security of the United States as well. So we're working on that to be able to sustain our livelihood here and use the Indo-Pac strategy to better our economy here, because it only helps the United States. So I think now is the time that we can, I think, wake up the United States and use Guam, Palau, and Micronesia in a national strategy so that, you know, not only for Taiwan, but national, you know, safety for the United States. So thank you for hopefully try to press for that. Again, one more time, press for that cabotage waiver so that we can at least temporarily try out something so that we can get foreign airlines to fly to Palau, like from Singapore to Guam, and pick up passengers from here and go to the United States so that we can have a little bit of a competition here. We can't continue to pay $600 a round trip from here to Saipan because there's only one carrier. So if United Airlines goes and because invariably, Delta Airlines, United Airlines, American Airlines, everybody's going to go to the Department of Transportation when we have that hearing for the waiver. And they're going to say, no, you should not have these foreign airlines compete with us. Well, we're going to try a little strategy on this time. I think you brought that up, that there's that nonstop availability from Guam to the West Coast. Let's just ask for that. And if United Airlines says, no, you don't want it, then you do it. You fly it or lose it. So we have something now that we can put the onus on their back.
Thank you very much, Governor. I'm gonna wrap it up, but just one real quick scenario here, and again, this will be, there'll be, hopefully there, Madam Chair will call another oversight to discuss the findings. But just one thing and an assurance at this point, that based on the findings here, are there mechanisms in place, Council McDonald, have you recommended any safeguards to put in place so again, the findings do not continue? I mean, the practice of these findings do not continue?
I think the most natural safeguard is continued healthy dialogue between management and the board with an honest conversation about the findings. And I think in that sense, then organically it'll tend to self-correct. So I'm encouraged, and I've seen great cooperation between the board and management. So yeah.
Thank you. And in the meantime, again, I know there's one measure that's a corrective measure that I'm hoping to get a public hearing pretty soon, and it would go a long ways in correcting the flaws that we see has happened that maybe help contribute to the situation here. So that being said, I think thank you very much, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. And as a reminder to the members present today, this report is not on our agenda, and as our president and our board chair mentioned, that this has been referred to the authorities, and so we're not moving on or sweeping this under the rug, but we will address it at the
Point of
proper
order.
time.
Madam Chair?
Senator Fisher, do you have a
Thank you
point
very-
of information?
Thank you very much. Point of information. Are you privy to any part of the report?
Senator Fisher, I received the report just a few hours ago.
Have you had a chance to look at it? I'm not asking about the details.
Senator Fisher, I read the summary, and that was it.
Having read the summary, do you believe that you can continue to chair this
Senator
committee?
Fisher, this is not a oversight hearing of me, not for you to question me today, but this
No.
is an oversight hearing with GVB, and so we will stick to the agenda. And
Yes,
so this
ma'am.
report
We
is
will-
not on the
We will stick to
agenda.
the agenda, but I would remind you that you have a duty to recuse yourself where you are ethically challenged.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Okay, we will continue. Senator Kanata, you are recognized. Senator Titagui.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and holy moly. I think everybody that's here today wants to see that report. I'm glad, Madam Chair, that you are going to have a hearing on it later on to discuss, oh, you didn't? Oh, okay, well, maybe an oversight may be called into order for something like this. I think that it should be done. If not, then I'm pretty sure one of us can have this oversight ourselves, because we know the media here wants to know more about this report. And that being said, you know, this report has names in it that we all know who they are. Some of them are board members. And I'd like to see that through. So I'm going to try and respect your wishes, Madam Chair, to not bring it up. However, you know, the chairman of GVB did mention it earlier, so he opened up that can of worms. So
Yes, thank you, Senator Titagui.
Yeah.
And as GVB themselves have sought the process to report it to authorities for investigation, I am respecting the process that GVB
Sure.
has requested for.
absolutely, Madam Chair, and there's nothing stopping the media from getting this report and putting out there for everyone to see, which will happen. So if you're listening right now, it'll be on the news. Other than that, you know, I've been at GVB. I was a former deputy general manager there. And even when I was there, I knew that there was some, I call shenanigans going on with the board. Definitely there was the bylaws saying one thing, and then the enabling legislation would say another. So I'm glad that the attorney is there, and especially you, President Gutierrez, for coming forward to cleaning up the issue, to make it straight and forward. Before 20 years of the sins of the past cannot continue into the future. President Gutierrez, I introduced legislation that would actually it's not going to take care of everything. Attorney McDonald, sorry, I know you have a whole lot to change on that, but the part that I'd like to get through with, have you had a chance, President Gutierrez, to see Bill 38-37? Can you?
I have not read it, Madam Senator, that, but I know that in discussion, I know the gist
Content of it?
Content of it, and how we can.
Do you support it?
I support a change to make clarity the issue of.
And what you read and the intent of what the bill, did it provide that for you?
Yes,
Okay, and do you support it?
I support it. And
Thank you.
I think-
Jerry, do you support that?
In principle, I support the objective of the bill.
Okay, thank you. So when we have a public hearing on this, I don't expect you guys to come in and change your mind because the board is telling you to change your mind on this bill. I've introduced this bill in the 35th Guam legislature. I've introduced it in the 36th Guam legislature, and I'm in the 37th, and I'm introducing it again. It's not going to be the last one, too, because based on your testimony, Attorney McDonald, there are other changes that are going to be made, and I hope we can do that. I'm sorry, Perez and Gutierrez, can you put, so we can have you on
I
clearly?
implore our chairman to support it too, because I want him to know how we're going to work clearly, because, you know, with a brain like this and success like this in business, I tell you, when you're fighting big people like Hawaii and other destinations, I would need his input like that, but, and to stay in our own lane, but I hope that they would support a more clear delineation of what the board can do and what management can do.
Absolutely, and a board that is transparent and accountable. You know, I've known George for years, and I know he's very capable individual who has a lot of great ideas and can contribute to the island as a whole, not just for Tumon Bay, but for the whole island as a destination. But, you know, you were, Director Chu, since you're put on the spotlight right now, you were elected through membership, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Are you required to provide financials? Your financial?
I have no idea about that.
Attorney McDonald, are the members who are elected in to the board, are they required to provide their financials like other board members?
The short answer is no.
Okay, thank you. So would you mind providing your financials?
I believe I'm required to provide a conflict of interest statement.
But not your financials like the other board
I
members?
believe my financial statements are my personal matter, and it's
Okay.
not open for the public, and it's only relevant to the Department of Revenue and Taxation and myself.
Okay, so then you're sitting on a board that has to deal with almost, well, in the past, $23 million of taxpaying money. All other boards, board members who sit on boards are required, even the mayors, even us, we're all required to put our financials out there. You're holding 23 million, well, once we get back on track, about 23 million of taxpaying money. Don't you think that the public deserves to know your financials sitting on a board?
I think the public deserves to know whether I have a conflict of interest. I don't think it matters whether or not to the public what I make or what I do.
Nothing to hide then, right?
Right?
Nothing
So
to hide, right?
This has nothing to do with hiding, Senator.
Well,
this has to do with my personal...
It's called transparency and accountability. You're in the government of Guam. GVB might be a nonprofit organization, but it's funded.
I'm elected by the GVB membership,
98% is
Senator.
funded by the
I'm
government
elected
of
by
Guam.
the GVB membership based upon the enabling legislation on how the membership of GVB is formed. So until that's changed, then...
Until it's changed. Well,
Until it's
hopefully we
changed.
can make the change, and the change will be for better. Speaking of membership, I want to ask Mr. McDonald, proxies are given to members, or basically, let's put it this way, when a person is voted in to be a member of GVB, they have one vote, depending on if they actually donated more money to GVB, up to a limit of 1,000 gives them 10 votes. Stop me if I'm wrong anywhere, okay, Mr. McDonald? But how is it that in this last election, that one person walks in, or maybe I think it was two people combined, had 285 votes that came to vote in for membership? How did that happen? 285 votes from this one person who came in. How does that happen? I mean, and by the way, isn't that like 48% of the whole vote for these members to sit on this board? Can you, 48%, I think, yeah, I was right on the 48.
All I can give is a positive statement, which is that that's what the law provides, is that the membership can pool their votes in certain ways to ensure that their chosen candidate is elected. And that's the way the rules are set up. I think I did mention earlier about the cumulative voting and how the Enabling Act itself doesn't allow cumulative voting when under corporate law in most states, cumulative voting is the default rule. So you kind of have the ability to easily pool votes depending on, and again, it depends on whether the members, informally or formally, and you might consider it in corporate law, you might see these as voting trusts or other types of arrangements between stockholders. And
Yeah,
just a second on that.
Can you shorten it? Because
Just a second on that real quick.
Yeah.
You know, even the ability for the members to caucus on who they want actually is GVB business. This is the tension that we see about the open government law, is the caucusing itself about pooling votes subject to the open government law. So I don't know exactly how it's done. I can only tell you that the
Okay, let's
legislation-
simplify it. The 4 people are voted in from membership, the top 4 that get the most votes. Okay, can you tell me the 4th person, the 4th lowest vote from the top?
I believe that's...
How many votes did that person get to get in?
$294 votes.
And this one individual had 230 votes. Something is wrong here, people. Maybe that's why we see the same people sitting on this board all the time. And that needs to change. Attorney McDonald, you brought up all board members could be on a checking account, or can they sign? Any board members can sign on a check from GVB?
I think it's...
Has it been done in the past?
I don't know. I don't know.
Is GVB a 501c3 nonprofit? Or should they be, to protect the board when it comes to these financial interests?
That's actually, the nonprofit status is actually one of the issues that the BRCC is looking at, and whether it needs to comply with the rules around nonprofits. I will say that in other public corporations, and public in the sense that it's owned by the government, there is compliance with it, either through filing a tax return or from an audit that looks to the information that would be in the tax return.
So your recommendation is?
I'm not there yet. I still have to study the issue,
Okay,
but it looks like yes, there has to be something along those lines.
You know, though it might seem I'm hard on you guys, it's because I know this has been going on for 2 decades, and it needs to be done. It needs to be cleaned up so that we have confidence in GVB that $23 million that is given to GVB yearly is spent correctly, open and transparent. I just wanted to make sure, because I didn't want to put, Mayor Hoffman on the line, but I wanted to make sure he understood what's in the current Public Law 36107, which is the budget law. So, Chairman Chu, are you familiar with the section? Section 35 on page 146, Chapter 7, regarding the fiscal authority for the Guam Visitors Bureau. Are you familiar with that? Have you had a chance to read that section of the budget bill, for the FY23 budget bill?
Regarding what?
The authority that gives the CEO, or, there's really no CEO. That needs to be changed, Mr. McDonald.
Well, you see,
GM.
I'm confused. Are we talking about the general manager, the CEO, the president?
GM.
Right?
I know,
Is it
there's
the GM
three.
now?
There's 3
I think
titles.
we go back and forth between GM and CEO.
Okay,
president.
let's
But
go
I
to
like
GM.
I like the title president much better than GM. So I'm
Okay.
pretty sure
Well, right
our
now
governor
is,
would prefer that also.
Mr. McDonald, is the GM
Former governor,
part of
governor,
the
no,
bylaws or enabling legislation? What does it say for his position? The enabling legislation and the bylaws, what does it say? GM or president?
Enabling legislation only refers to the general manager.
Okay, GM. So, George, are you familiar with that section of the law for the GM?
I believe the fiscal year budget ending September 30th, 2023 gives full fiscal authority to the general manager of GVB.
Okay, so you did read that section?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, as you put in this position, that you know exactly what the law states. So I'm glad to know that you read that. Thank you. With regarding to business risk and compliance and control and bylaws, I just want to commend you, Attorney McDonald, for going into that direction. And just for everybody to know, it's specifically compliance risk. Compliance risk is the threat posed to a company's financials, organizational, and reputational standing resulting from violation of laws, regulations, codes of conduct, or organizational standard of practice. That's exactly what that means. You're covering everything. So I do agree with you when it comes to putting something like that in place, so you can go through everything. I hope, Chairman George, you've seen that, and the definition behind the whole business risk and compliance is a great idea. That's a start. So that format and foundation should really be followed. It's a great way to clean house.
You know, I don't disagree with that, and we've been talking a lot about the bylaws and enabling legislation, going back to things back in 2014. You know, we've all lived on Guam. Are we going to say GVB did a really bad job these past 20 years? Are we going to go back if it's in violation? If it's in violation of the law, then everything should be voided. Everything that was done by GVB for the past, whatever, 20, 30 years should be voided. And we need to go back and recorrect everything like we do on the other boards I've sat on. If there's been a violation of the law, that means that everything that was done by the previous boards and all the action that was done by GVB is void and null. I believe you mentioned that in one of our meetings, that if it's illegal, right? So are we really going to do that? I mean, are we going to say now all of a sudden all those things that were not done properly is void? Right? So, I mean, we've all lived on Guam for all these years. Are we going to say GVB did a bad job all these years? Tourism went from however it was up to 1.6 million prior to the 2019 pre-pandemic level. I mean, Guam was rolling in with the tourists coming in. So was GVB doing the wrong job because something was wrong between the bylaws and the enabling legislation? I'm not an expert. I just got elected onto the board. So my thought process is, we've been talking about amending the bylaws to meet the enabling legislation. The enabling legislation was done, what, 30 years ago? Maybe more? And, you know, Attorney Joe McDonald says it's a live being, it's evolving. So the enabling legislation that was formed 30 years ago is irrelevant today. So instead of trying to change the bylaws to fit the enabling legislation, maybe we should take a look at the enabling legislation and make it relevant to today so that we can have an efficient, transparent GVB. And, you know, we keep talking about transparency of the board. We want transparency not just of the board, but we want transparency of management and employees. That's what transparency is all about. It's not just about transparency with the board. Transparency with the entire GVB is what I'm looking at.
Well, if
these things are, instead of finding one, you know, we talk about one way, let's look at the other way. Hey, you know, Senator Fisher was a former legal counsel for GVB, if I'm not mistaken. Should we say he did a, you know, I apologize for dragging you into this, Senator, but was he wrong in all his legal rulings and advice that he gave to GVB? I don't think so. But again, all I'm saying is he's been my legal counsel on some other boards I used to sit on too, so it's okay, you know. But all I'm saying is that we know we have a problem, okay?
Right.
We got to fix the problem, but we don't have to look at the problem as there's something wrong with the board, or there's something wrong, so, you know?
I
we
think
gotta
this
look,
report
we
on the
gotta look
BRC
at the problem. We got to look at this problem and say, what's the best solution? Do we change the bylaws to fit the current enabling legislation? Or do we change the current enabling legislation to make it more relevant? Years ago when they did the initial enabling legislation, we only know what the business environment and the current tourism environment and the culture is now, today. So maybe instead of trying to fit those bylaws to make something that was done 30 years ago, we should fix the enabling legislation to make it relevant to how we should be running our business, how we should be running GVB today, to make it more efficient, make it more transparent, and bring in tourists and bring back tourism to Guam to where it was, not just where it was pre-pandemic, but better than pre-pandemic, higher than pre-pandemic. People keep talking about Hawaii want to dissolve their visitors industry, right? Our visitors bureau. They have exceeded pre-pandemic levels in arrival. We're at 212,000 as the fiscal year 2000 ending 2022, right? September 30th, 2022. Our arrivals was 212,000 compared to 1.6 million in 2019. We're way behind the 8 ball right now. Hawaii is at past pre-pandemic levels, but do they have? So you know you can't compare the two destinations.
Chairman Chu,
For
yes.
the record, Madam, I just,
But
I know that is looking at, you know, that the management should also have transparency, but I have no problem when, as the president,
Yeah.
CEO, general manager, I submit my financial disclosure, everything.
Yes,
If
you-
I want to keep that job, I owe it to the general public to submit my financial disclosure of what I make and what I don't make and how much broke I am. It's all there.
you know, thank you, President,
I'm more
or General
transparent
Manager
than anybody in the board that's
Gutierrez.
elected.
Thank you so much. And you know, Chairman Chu, I think that it's both sides. We're going to look at both bylaws and the enabling legislation and find out what's the best fit for the Guam Visitors Bureau. Not just go one over the other. No, we're going to find out what's the best fit that brings in transparency and accountability. That's what I'm hoping that the board is going to do with the administration, as well as working with us as well. But you know, you ask about, oh, well, voiding everything out, you know, because it happened in the past. No. We're moving forward. However, because of what's been going on, because of this report on the BRCC that's going to be out, that was FOIA'd by one of our colleagues, then you'll understand why it's so important to be transparent, and then you'll understand why you don't have secret meetings between board members. No, let me finish. GM Gutierrez, when I heard something in the media that your chairman came to you in March, I think it was in March, to tell you of a meeting that happened between two board members, a vendor, and himself. And this was to discuss GVB matters and voting on something that was going to get through. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there was mention a private organization meeting took place that was not sanctioned. Or in other words, the meeting had discussed how to vote, and other GVB businesses was held in a secret meeting in 2021. And when you brought this up to the board in March of 2022, I'm not sure what happened, because then all of a sudden the board decided not to meet anymore after that. So there is obviously something wrong here that needs to be adjusted, and the sins of the past is not a justification to move forward and continue on the way status quo, because status quo is not acceptable.
Senator, I'd like to clarify, because I was the one that made the motion to stop meeting, and it had nothing to
Right,
do.
that's why I'm asking, because I want to
well,
know what the
I'll tell you
status
what-
of
I'll
that.
tell you
And I'm
what,
asking the
because
GM, George,
I was asked.
I'm asking the GM what happened to that scenario, because it's obvious that as soon as he brought it up, it went dead, because the board decided not to meet anymore. So what was the status? And this has nothing to do, Madam Chair, with the BRCC report. This has something to do with something else that happened. So what was the status? Because you guys definitely closed shop after that. Can you explain? And who was the chairman at the time, and who were the individuals that had this secret meeting discussing businesses?
The report has my affidavit and Jerry Parrish's affidavit, about the revelation from that chairman about that meeting that took place that he felt uncomfortable. It's in that report.
Okay, so this is something totally different. I mean, what happened back? Okay, go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, I think you're conflating the two issues.
Right, there were two
What the
different-
chairman was saying is really different from
Right.
that event.
Right.
He called a pause so we can straighten out what we've been working on.
Right, that's different.
Senator, I like sorry to
Well,
interrupt, but I.
can you allow Mr. Perez to finish, please?
Sorry?
Thank you. Go ahead, finish, because
No.
you're talking about two different things, two situations.
Yeah, the incident that he was referring to is not related basically directly to Mr. Chairman's motion
Right,
to
right.
pause the
Right.
meetings.
Did not, I agree.
No.
I agree.
Yeah.
This was something that happened, an incident that happened before that. You had nothing to do with this for the pause. This had something to do with a question that was given to, or not a question, but the GM had heard of two individuals and the chairman, not you at the time, discussing business in secret. That this cannot happen. It's against the bylaws and it's against the enabling legislation. There, double whammy.
Senator, I think the governor has already answered that question, that he has filled out an affidavit regarding the BRCC. It's been submitted to the proper authorities. The management of
It's
GVB
something
has
different,
clearly stated
Chairman Chu. It's
that
something different.
they are not the qualified party to take
Yeah.
this thing further. And I think since it's already been forwarded to the proper authorities to investigate this thing further, I don't think it's proper for us to be discussing this, and we should let the proper authorities go into it. And if there's something that needs to be done at a later point in time, then maybe that we can do it. But right now, I think it would be wise for. I think even
I agree.
management is agreeing with me.
I agree,
But I
sir.
just want to clarify one point that you've been associating, that after we heard about the secret meeting, there was a pause in the board meetings. I just want to make a very clear clarification on that. That was not the case. If anybody in here thinks that we paused the board meeting because there was some secret meeting, I want to say there is no such thing. The reason why I made a motion to pause the meeting because I was at that point in time, I asked our legal counsel, Mr. McDonald, whether or not the board had legal counsel representation, and he told me no, he did not represent he did not represent the board during that meeting. He clearly stated during the meeting, you can go back to the recording of the meeting. I said, I've never been on the board where I had no legal representation. We're volunteering our time, and until we figure out what to do with this legal representation, I'm not going to attend any more board meetings, because it's crazy to be subjecting to myself to risk without legal counsel representation. And that's the reason why I made the motion to halt further board meetings until
And-
that issue was resolved. So there's
Okay.
two separate issues. I just want to
for the
clarify that
record-
today.
And for the record, you were on that board illegally in the first place, to even make a motion in the first place, from what I gather. When
So-
you were sitting on during that time, George, you were not even you were not properly placed
if
on the
I- if I
board.
say-
But I want to allow Mr. McDonald
So-
to rebut what he just said regarding that, because that's not what I remember, George, because I was in that meeting and the
You
discussion.
were not at that meeting when I
No,
made that motion. But
I was not in that meeting, but when
But-
we discussed this in a meeting earlier this year. So, Mr. McDonald, can you explain, please, what happened when, because I saw you shaking your head. No, that's not what was said, so please.
My memory is a little different, Mr. Chairman. I think what I said is I don't represent individual board members.
That's what you said. Thank you for clarifying. That's all I wanted to say, George, because, that was another question I had here for you, George, because you said during the earlier meeting that we had that you did not trust anything that came out of legal counsel's mouth, that you didn't believe what he was saying is true to form. So now that you're the chairman of the board, and so my question now is, are you going to go find another legal counsel that fits your, the answers that you want, or are we going to keep the same legal counsel?
I take exception to your comment about finding legal counsel that will answer questions on what I want. Okay, I want the correct interpretation of what I think of what the law should be.
Well, I think
okay?
he had
And
backing from the Attorney General's office. He even had backing from the Attorney General's office.
You guys are twisting the words. Okay, what's happening? I totally agree with the Attorney General's opinion.
Which was the same as your legal
The board
counsels.
cannot re-elect us. We were not being re-elected, Senator. What happened was the board followed legal counsel's advice on how to do the election, on how former Director Tani and myself were elected. The board followed legal counsel's advice in that step. So now are we going to say they followed legal counsel advice and then later on it turned out that we were wrong because we weren't on the agenda? So that's what the problem was. We weren't placed on the agenda, but I do believe the previous board, when I was elected at that time, followed legal counsel's advice on how the election should be held. Okay? So what happened there at the time when we were having that meeting was basically to right a wrong. Since the board did not put it on the agenda, they were going to place it on the agenda and have the problem rectified. Just like we said, if something was wrong, we've done that on many other boards. If something was wrong, legal counsel will make the advice, hey, you did this wrong, you have to redo it. So it was a redo. It was not an election re-elected. It was not the board re-electing us for a new term. It was to right a wrong. So the board has no right to elect us. I agree totally. It's the membership.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Chu. And just my last question. I know I'm taking a lot of time. Just one more, because I'm concerned about this part. Attorney McDonald, as you're looking into these bylaws and enabling legislation, I want you to look at the creation of the Human Resources Division that's stipulated in the bylaws regarding the personal rules and regs. Is the employees of GVB under the Civil Service Commission whenever there's a disgruntled matter or anything, or because when I was there, we were supposed to create a Human Resources Division at GVB. Has that been done yet?
I don't believe there is a Human Resources Division. I think what you're referring to is that the Enabling Act allows the board, allows the Bureau to create its own personnel rules and regulations.
Okay.
And it hasn't done so.
It hasn't. Okay, please look at, Mr. GM, please look into that, because that's something that should have been done. And I just wanted to commend all the employees at GVB and all the hard work they've been doing, especially during these very difficult times where you've lost colleagues because of, the funding wasn't there to pay for everybody that it used to be. But the work that you do, taking on, double shifts, especially during the pandemic, is commendable for all what you're doing. And the one thing that really hit hard was when your GM mentioned earlier about your morals, the moral problems that you're having, the employees, just confused about everything. It's not fair to you. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to set this straight so you know exactly the directions that you're being given are done thoroughly, it's thought out, it's transparent, and it's accountable. So thank you to the GVB employees. And thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Senator Titlegy. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Governor Gutierrez, there's been a tremendous amount of discussion about, or rather around, this report, the BRCC report. And the people of Guam have been watching this hearing, and I'm sure they really want to know what's in that report, because we seem to keep doing what we can to shovel dirt on top of it. Will the Guam Visitors Bureau post that report on its website?
Will it?
Yes, sir.
I have to check with the legal counsel. I know I released that to Senator Lujan under the FOIA.
Okay.
And Once that's there, I'm not sure,
Well, once it's there, it's out there, right?
but for us to go further and put it into the website, I don't know.
Well, I suppose process-wise, Senator Lujan could just return his copy to you, and then you could
Actually,
post
I
it.
have a copy, and whoever wants a copy of it
Excellent.
can view it at our office. I don't have the digital. I don't have the digital copy of the whole findings. I have this. I have the digital copy of the summary, and so it would.
But as far as
depend,
posting it on the website, I would have to ask legal counsel to.
Okay. I don't see, I mean, it is a report that it appears, at least by affidavit, the Bureau, through its agent, has adopted it as being true.
Let me ask legal counsel, right?
Okay, Mr. McDonald, you have an opinion on whether or not Governor Gutierrez can cause the report to be posted on the GVB website?
Once the GM made the decision to waive confidentiality, he can do whatever he wants with it.
Thank you. Governor Gutierrez, do you waive confidentiality as to that report, if it exists at all? Do you waive it?
I believe I did when I submitted the response on the FOIA.
Okay, so I guess, I don't want to overstate it, but people of Guam, you just got a green light, and hopefully that report will be up within a business day
Right.
on the GVB website. I don't know how your IT people.
It's going to take a while for the report itself, but the summary maybe is easy to go up.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
I think I can have the. I think I can have the summary on our website. Can we be able to do that? Would we be able to do the summary on the website? I ask my staff. Yes, we'll do the summary on the website. I don't have again the digital of the of
so
this thing. Yeah, but I'll do the summary.
Okay, your websites will be fine.
But I don't.
Point of inquiry, would Senator Lujan tell us his website address?
So,
You would have to ask
are you
me
still
that.
asking me to put it on our website?
And his too.
Yeah, let me.
Sorry about that.
I'm sorry.
Just go to your next question. I'll find my website.
So yours is a separate website from our website?
Yeah, he's Senator Lujan's looking for his address. What's your address? Website, GBB.
San Vitores Road.
So you can.
Okay, ladies. GuamVisitorsBureau.com.
Okay, so people at some point very soon, if they will go to GuamVisitorsBureau.com,
That's right. That's
can read at least
both. I think .com and .org, right?
Is it
Both, right? I know I have two addresses on my.
Okay.
It's .org and .com for me. So.
Okay, and otherwise, just do a Google search. You'll find it.
Yeah.
We'll post the summary.
Okay, and then Senator Lujan's going to put it up there too, and that's a tremendous thing because I know people are curious about what is contained within the report, and I have seen the summary, and the report is explosive, and we all need to look at that. And I was encouraged. I know that I've been shut down or discouraged from asking questions about the body of the report, and that's fine. I just want to make sure that we nail down the next oversight hearing on that report. Can we expect that, say, within 2 weeks?
Senator Fisher, the report has been forwarded for investigation to the OPA and to the Attorney General's office, so we'll allow that investigation to take place.
Well, I thought earlier you said that we were going to have a oversight concerning the
At
report.
a proper time, so after that investigation takes place.
Well, when will that proper time be? You know, we are a body answerable to the people of Guam, and we need to have an oversight on what happened in the hearing. Well, I'm disappointed in your response, ma'am. All right. I'd like to return to that idea, or what actually happened when the board stopped meeting. Mr. Chu, you've given us your perspective. I'd ask Governor Gutierrez, in your impression, why did the board stop meeting?
First of all, Senator, when I brought up the fact that there were things going on in the board meeting where board members were trying to move monies from one section to the other, to one program to the other, and I told them that that's not really their responsibility to do that, And I said that, and they didn't want to listen to what I had to say, so I kind of blew up and I said, well, I have information where you people are out there meeting. You are out there meeting secretly to determine the outcome of what will go on in the next board meeting.
So was it your...
And then I was challenged by a board member to show them. And this is why, that's what started this whole thing.
So, sir, at some point you had an impression that people were having a, for want of a better word, secret meeting?
I was told actually directly by one of them that attended with Jerry present.
That had the meeting?
That they had a meeting, yes.
Who were those people?
It's in the report. There was a meeting that at the office of United Airlines with Samson O'Hara, Ben Ferguson, Reuter, and they called Milton to come in, and he was the one that told us that after that he kind of felt uncomfortable going there. Because he was asked if it was all right if they kept Reuter in there.
Is that Milton Morinaga?
Yes.
Was he
He was the chairman.
Oh, he was the chairman. What is his professional association?
With who?
That's what I'm asking. Is he?
He used to work for PHR until January 31st.
Is PHR also known as KenCorp?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not too sure about that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, you're bringing me my next question. I noticed from the comptroller's testimony that PHR, KenCorp, and United Airlines, I assume, control 50% of the membership votes.
57%.
57%. And PHR has a member on the board?
PHR has no member on the board now.
Okay. Did they in the past?
Oh, yeah, that too.
Okay, but that would have been Mr. Morinaga?
There was Milton Morinaga and Ben Ferguson.
Okay. And what about United Airlines? Do they have a member on the board?
They had Samson O'Hara. Now they have Paula Monk.
Okay. And did you say that, was Samson O'Hara one of the people involved in that meeting? The secret meeting?
It was at his office, I believe.
Do you know, sir, whether or not any of the senators assembled before you are related to Mr. Shinohara?
What's that?
Do you know whether or not any of the senators here on this panel are related to Mr. Shinohara?
From what I know about, because he's part of my family too, yes. I think that Senator Amanda's mother is the sister of Sam.
Is that Senator Amanda Shelton?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we'll leave that for another day. I'm going to switch gear a little bit. Mr. Fujikawa, you spoke about the one village, one attraction approach. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Have you developed specifics yet for the one village, one attraction approach?
So right now we've actually met with, we did an overall meeting with the Mayor's Council, and we've actually sat with about 6 different municipalities on Guam.
Did you say 6?
6, correct.
What are those municipalities?
Right now we have in Alahan, Pidi, Agana Heights, Mangilao, Santa Rita, and Jotnya.
Okay, just to drill down a little bit, what sorts of things are you thinking about for PD?
So right now, what we're doing, and the reason why this plan takes a little time, is we're going into the community, sitting down with these municipal planning councils, the mayors themselves, and trying to find out what are the characteristics that are, how do you say, important to that community. So for example, with PD, they really cherish the beaches, the coral reefs, and so building into that theme, we're looking at first, real estate that we can use to develop into that and encourage preservation of the coral reefs. And I believe the PD mayor also is asking us to partner with the University of Guam to create a research laboratory to explore that.
Okay, and I'll just stick with PD. When do you expect, or do you have a timeline for creating this attraction?
So right now, we're trying to put together a master plan that makes sense, and the reason why is these 19 different attractions have to be unique, and they have to have some cultural tie-in. So I'm looking at probably closer to the end of this calendar year to have a master plan for the different 19 villages. understanding that we've been going through a village roadshow the past 2 months and sitting down with the community and my team, we go back and kind of conceptualize what we can bring to the table, see if it's feasible in terms of monetizing it for the community, and then going back to present to them. So,
How do you intend to market the one village, or village and attraction?
this is towards the international markets.
Okay.
So once they're established, GVB, we have access to a lot of different channels, and because this program is also being overseen by the research side of things, we're looking into mobile location data so that we know that if we anchor an attraction in the south, do we have enough people passing through this attraction? And it kind of gives us a better tool to diversify, spreading out the markets throughout the island. So it's not a set it and forget it plan, and these mayors are actually very, grateful in us in our partnership, is that year over year we'll go back to them and give them a scorecard on, you guys welcome 20,000 visitors down here, we can maybe improve on a different market. So we're really trying to kind of be a big brother in that sense and make sure that these attractions offer that unique experience.
Senator, if I could add to that, actually the question you asked is how do they market this? The whole approach is to market all these destinations in the aggregate. That's how we get the critical mass to really mean something in our source markets.
Okay.
So each village would have a different attraction, but we're marketing it in the aggregate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, by aggregate, you mean you'd be advertising the entire island, and this is what we have, right?
19 reasons to visit Guam.
Yeah, okay, which makes sense. You will market that just as is there anything new in the marketing of it? Have you got a new approach, or?
No, it's the re-emphasizing the cultural identity and the brand identity of Guam. And it's a collection of these different attractions that make us a unique, a destination from other destinations. So we're playing on the different attributes that Guam has to offer, both tangible as well as intangible. Intangible issues are like the language, the song, and things of that nature, right, that our visitors would like to experience. The tangible assets are what Nico and his team are working on, and physically being able to experience and touch these different things. So collectively, maybe marketing one or two is not significant, but marketing the whole island in the aggregate, highlighting these different attractions in these different villages, means something.
Are you going to, I guess, distribute the responsibility for marketing among your satellite branches or whatever they're called?
No, the GVB would be basically the marketing agent for the whole thing. Now, these different villages, of course, would participate, and that's one of the reasons why the mayors have been involved in some of the road shows to demonstrate to them what it takes.
Okay.
May I just add real quick, because I know that you kind of threw out what's there at PD, right?
What's the?
When you kind of said, like, what's there at PD, but with the advent of Governor Lou Leon Guerrero eventually turning over the USO to the PD, Municipal Planning Council, and in working with Mr. Tani of Fisheye, and in looking at what a Japanese philanthropist did in Palau, where they actually had aquariums worked out into the ocean. They had all these things that tie in not only for the tourists, but also for the children of Palau. We want to bring it in for Guam.
Okay.
So that was really what that great thing that we can do not only for tourists, but we tie it in with Tani's Fish Eye, tie it in for the children of Guam, and have. We're already looking for that same group of Japanese people that are in donating stuff like this, so that they can also be a part of a partnership to build something like this. That was their background.
Sir, have you been involved in, Governor Gutierrez again, have you been involved in any discussions about the actual return of the USO property?
No. The paperwork's going through, whatever it is. I don't know. But I'm just to know that when it eventually gets back to the government of Guam, that I think the governor, working out with the mayor's council.
So that property is still in DOD inventory?
I don't know where it's at.
Okay. Because, and the reason I bring that up is, I may be wrong on this, but I believe that Admiral Nicholson told us that no more property was going to be returned to the government. Senator Kanata?
As the Military Bureau Oversight Chair, DOD is currently undergoing some disposed classified lands, which is including of USO and some wetlands or flood properties. At this time, it is still undergoing some of its legal work. It has not been returned back to the government of Guam, but not too sure what you need to know more about USO.
Well, if I mean, if we were talking, I believe, Governor, in general about attractions for the village of
Okay.
PD.
Yes.
And that USO property is just beautiful, of course. You know, the beach and the corals and so forth. And I hope very much PD can get that back.
I think in discussion that probably everybody wanted at first, even some veterans group wanted to avail themselves to that, but I think the governor, in discussing with her, I think her mind is more towards the PD and council and people of PD.
All right. Thank you for that response. And then, sir, if I could ask the comptroller a few questions about the financial updates he gave us. Sir, I'm looking at the financial update that is the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. Do you have that before you, or?
Yes, I do, Senator.
Okay, I just wanted to, it looks like well, I'll wait for you to. Okay, thank you. And again, I'm looking at statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. As expenses, it looks like professional services are 2.76 million. Is that roughly correct?
That's correct.
And that would be 47% of Visitor Bureau expenditures?
Roughly 47 or 48%.
What are the contractual services? This is not broken down. They're $500,000.
A large part of that, Senator, has to do with our marketing reps. We contract like marketing reps in Japan, in Korea, Taiwan, and those are professional services. They help us develop our marketing strategy, and so that's basically a big chunk of that.
Okay, so there's contractual services for operations. Is that what you're referring to?
Senator, if I may also add, the contractual service mentioned before you also includes security, waste collection, and website maintenance.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your response. Could you repeat?
Sure. My response is, in addition to what the Vice President had mentioned, contracts in relating to security, waste collection, and website maintenance are also involved.
And for those things, you're spending $500,000?
And other professional services, Senator, but the composition of the other, I do not have it at this moment, but we can provide it to you.
And you also have contractual services for something called TAF projects. That's an acronym, TAF. What does TAF stand for?
That stands for the Tourist Attraction Fund.
Okay, and what contractual services to Tourist Attraction Fund projects are costing $500,000?
Sure. The main composition is really for the Triangle Park renovation. Others include 2 months landscaping, which as of February amounted to approximately $117,000. Other projects include the fireworks and drone shows.
Okay. I'm sure there will be plenty of more questions on this eventually, but the contractual services, have they been awarded to anyone who has an interest in the Guam Visitor Bureau Board?
I do not have that information at this time, but we can give
Fair
that
enough.
to you.
Your personnel expenses, I had them down at 1.263 million as a total. Yeah, I think that is correct. Your personnel expenses are 21% of your budget?
Approximately, yes.
And, okay, and then you have another category altogether, and it's just called Other, and it's $1.7 million, which is 30% of your budget. What is Other?
So the significant composition of other expenses, Senator, relates to grants and sponsorship.
I'm sorry, sponsorship?
Sponsorships to, for cultural and sports organizations.
I'm sorry.
These are sponsorships for cultural and sports events and organizations.
Anything else in other expenses?
There is also travel, along with utility expense and other operational costs such as materials and supplies.
Okay, how much of that is travel?
I believe as of February 2023, travel was $255,000.
So $250,000 in travel?
That's correct.
What's the time period for that travel?
I believe this was as of February 2023.
From the beginning of the year?
Beginning of the fiscal year, yes.
Or then that began October 1st, right?
That's correct.
October, November, December, January, February? Okay, so you're on track to spend more than $500,000 in travel just for the calendar year, or the fiscal year?
If we annualize that amount, that would be correct.
Well,
But
okay. And I don't gainsay the travel. A lot of it's necessary. You are, in fact, the Guam Visitors Bureau. I would assume that the general manager is the individual who naturally is responsible for doing all that. We looked at these numbers, 21% for personnel, 47% for personnel, professional services, and 30% is other. Do your financials compare favorably as percentages of expenditure with other visitor bureaus?
Senator, to answer your question, we do not have the information of other visitors bureau, but
Okay.
we can make that comparison.
Yeah, I mean, that's something for you to do, I suppose, in-house. But obviously, my concern is that we might be devoting too much money to other and personnel services at the expense of needed professional services. Governor, did you want to comment on that? Or? No. Okay, all right.
Can I inject a point of information, Madam Chair? Just real quick.
Please.
I just got some information. In regards to those lands in PD, I just want to quote just real quick Admiral Nicholson saying, except for some parcels of land already in the process of being returned to the local government. That's what he said, okay? And there were 5 designated parcels of property that are going to be returned to Gulf Guam. However, H.R. 673, introduced by our delegate, submitted in Congress to return that to the original landowners. So, again, as we move forward to doing that, there's a bill in Congress, H.R. 673, and I'll just read it real quick if you allow me. It's to amend Public Law 106-504 to allow certain land in Guam to be transferred to previous recorded owners of that land for the purpose of or to be enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. This act may be cited as the Guam Excess Land Return Act.
This is a USO property?
Well, all lands that are going to be returned, so that's inclusive of the 5 parcels. So the identified 5 parcels of land that are going to be returned, and there's a bill in Congress that is saying that, I guess, first dibs at this point is to give it to the original landowners. So as you move forward in that, I just be cognizant of the fact there's a bill in Congress that says otherwise. I mean, saying the same thing, but not for public use, but for, I guess, to original landowners. So again, it's H.R. 673.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Fujikawa, I know that you heard what the Senator just said. Based upon that, have you been in contact with the delegate's office?
Not in this particular project, no.
Not in, okay. Based on what we just heard from Senator Lujan, do you anticipate talking to the delegate's office?
Sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, they might have just put the kibosh on.
Senator, just to note too, we also are working with the mayors to identify multiple properties within their community that we can go ahead and try to develop for them. So
Okay.
if one door closes, there's always one that we could open up and explore. So.
Thank you. I am now looking at your financial. Okay. Okay, the chair is asking me to wrap up. I wanted to ask some questions having to do with your assigned and restricted funds. Oh, sorry. As of February 28th, 2023, but I'm afraid I've got multiple questions on that, but with respect to everybody being here a long time, I think I'll just wrap it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator San Nicolas.
Oh, finally. Good morning, panel, Mr. Chu, Governor, Mr. Paris, and the rest, Attorney McDonald. Thank you. Just met you out there in the morning. Regarding PD, there's actually I think they called it the Emerald River. So my wife and I stopped by there the last weekend, and it was really pretty. So there is something down there, and there was a lot of tourists who were down there. You know, it was really, really nice. As a matter of fact, they were actually feeding the fish. I should have taken the picture of my wife because she's prettier. She took a picture of me instead. But yes, it's actually really, really nice place. And I think all over the island, there's really a lot of significant places where we can expend some of this money to promote ourselves. And you know, while we're here talking about all of this stuff, we got Hawaii taking our lunch money. So I do believe that transparency is in order. And from time to time, we may have to change our policies and our procedures so that we serve the people well. And I was asking Tello, I said, what is GVB? You know, I'm real quite new to politics still. I said, what is GVB? Is this you know, what happens when a government and a corporation have a baby and this is what happens? And so, you know, I'm still learning how this works. But there's one question that I wanted to ask, and is that, sir, you mentioned that the board can circumvent the leadership and do what it needs, you know, do something freely without management. That was something that was mentioned earlier that I wanted to just clarify. Is that something that happens?
Is that directed at me?
Yes, sir.
Senator?
Yes,
Okay.
Attorney. Yes, I'm sorry.
I guess the elephant in the room is that the board is very powerful.
The board is very powerful.
And even though there are laws that say, you know, there's a certain way to get the employees to do something, the board is cloaked with this authority, apparent authority, to affect individual welfare of employees. So from time to time, you might see, you know, what might seem like an order that's given, even though what really needed to happen was a resolution. Okay. And this could be something as trivial as getting the secretary, and by that I mean the bureau secretary, asking her for stuff. Maybe not such of a big deal. But in other instances, you might see directors going straight up to the financial controller and saying, I need this to happen, which would be a little bit of a, you know, it's kind of like the governor showing up, Governor Leon Guerrero showing up at your house and saying, hey, you know, maybe we can ask you to do this. And it's a little bit more difficult to say no to that. So I think, does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. You know, accountability is the most important in everything, and I think that really, because I remember growing up, and the governor would always say, you know, the buck stops with me, you know, and I think, you know, he's in a position of leadership, and he should be making the decision, of course, with the thing with, you know, with some advice and direction from the board. So, Governor, could you explain further how this stuff is happening, and and what corrective measures we may have to, we should take as a legislative body?
You mean this incongruency between what the bylaws say?
Yes, sir.
And versus the, yeah, because I of course, wanted to make sure that I know when I first came in, what is my authority? I mean, what do I do, you know, in relations to the board? And in speaking with the legal counsel, he brought to my attention that what they're doing in the past several years of following a rules and regulations that is incongruent with the law is wrong, and it should stop. And so that's where I was telling the board members that you just can't go and get a chair and sit down in the destination office and like you're being part of the staff, which was done in the past. There's actually a board member sitting there that has his own desk inside the management of. So that one was that everybody started just doing the wrong thing for years and years, and I tried to stop it because the buck, like you said, stops with me, right? And I don't want some employee listening to a board member to say, release that check to this vendor right now because they're asking for it, they're pressing me for it. And so then you lose control. And so that's when I said we have to do the third amended bylaws to make it congruent. And this is where Director Chu at that time realized that yeah, we have to take a pause, and he did the right thing of taking that pause until the BRCC came about with the new third amended bylaws, which hasn't yet been accepted, hopefully soon by someone to make it congruent. And that's where the problem is that somebody was doing the wrong thing for the longest time, and they just don't want to change. They like it better that way. And so hopefully they would approve the third amended bylaws. And I know that Director Jones was working with us on that, and he did even tell me himself that if they, in front of the membership, he would make the motion to accept it, but we never got to that point. But with his help, we really came to just get it done once and for all so that Director Chu can sit down with me and give me directions, just me, because he can talk to me, but not other employees. And I'll follow him because I have a lot of respect for his business acumen. And he's in everything that's tourism related, and I trust his judgment.
Thank you, Governor. That's very, very wonderful for you to say. I do also respect Mr. Chu and Mr. Perez there. You know, you guys have been in the industry for quite some time, and it should be noted that you guys helped move the island forward. And I wanted to thank you for that, you know, publicly, for the work that you do out in the community, especially you, Governor. Mr. Chu, would you have anything to say on the matter?
No, I don't have any further to add. I think I've already made my point very clear that the board, as the chairman of this board, will follow all the rules and regulations according to the government of Guam law. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, sir. And Mr. Perez, do you have anything to add, sir?
No, the only thing I wanted to do is double back actually to an important question that the senator asked about the contractual services. A big part of the other is really related to the VSOs, visitor safety officers. It's like over $700-something thousand. You know those folks with the yellow shirt down helping people out there? That goes to that.
I'm sorry, did you say $10,000?
No, there are over $700,000 that goes specifically to the VSOs, visitor safety officers down. You see all over the place.
Okay.
That's
Who's got the VSO contract?
G4S.
G4S?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. He used up all his time already. Just kidding.
I'm sorry to take that time, but I wanted to
quiet
double
down
back
there.
and clarify that.
Sir, do you have anything to add while you're sitting there?
No comment.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. I really appreciate your testimony. I was a customs officer for a very long time, and I watched how economies have switched from Japan to Korea, and I was always wondering, what are they doing? You know, was it GVB that actually encouraged more Koreans? But it was actually the movement in economies switching from Japan. And, you know, I met some people down at Home Depot and says, you know, I actually have to, you know, stop speaking Japanese and I learned Korean. So, you know, we have to be watching trends, right? And I hope that GVB stays ahead of those trends as we watch market shifts. But I also understand the quality of our tourists is very important as well, you know, because I've seen ships come in and the Australians, they're just nice and bubbly and, you know, cheery and everything. And then, you know, so I also was down in Palau, and the governor was mentioning, you know, how they manage their tourism. And on my way to the Philippines, I sat across I think it was a Norwegian couple and an Israeli couple. And, I mean, the tourism economy can, you know, if it expanded further and farther, I think we can go a long way. But gentlemen, we have a lot of work to do. We got to bring those numbers up. We're all wishing that, you know, things turn around here, and so I entrust that you all can do the right thing. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Siniclas. I want to thank everyone for your participation in today's hearing. Thank you to the GVB staff, management, board of directors for being here this morning. And GVB for us is a very vital bridge between our visitor industry and the diverse people and businesses who are its stakeholders. And if GVB is to succeed and for this industry to thrive, stakeholders must have absolute confidence in GVB. I think it's fair to say confidence derives not just from the end results, but also from the means by which those results are achieved. And as we work to return to pre-pandemic levels of tourism activity and the benefits it brings, it's clear there remain challenges that have to be overcome. So both abroad and here at home, and change will come. So thank you very much, everyone. The time now is 12:20, and this oversight hearing is adjourned. Thank you.